Okay, I have a follow-up question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So I represent north of the Delta, and so the Delta is key in how water flows in the Delta impact the whole state. I've heard a lot of testimony here from a lot of people who who are in ag, and I'm in ag, but I have to represent the North State too. So the impact on it. So can somebody answer to me, how is the mitigation for this water in the Delta? Where is that water going to come from? From the north, if it doesn't take care of the Delta flows?
Well, once again,
Sure. I mean, this is something, and I believe a map was handed out that shows basically the Sacramento and San Joaquin River Basin. And what falls out from that, it shows the interconnectedness of things. Is that, so getting at your question, to the extent that any additional quantity of water is not provided from the San Joaquin River, and this is the proposal is for the February through June period, that's a critical period in terms of flows in the Delta, not just for salmon in the San Joaquin River, but also salmon in the Sacramento River and also for estuarine species. So to the extent that it does not come from the San Joaquin River, then it will have to come from elsewhere, because it's really a zero-sum game. It all has to add up.
well, if I could add to that, that's not exactly correct. Because what's going to happen first is they're doing phase one, and they're going to come up with a quantity of water from the San Joaquin River. Then they're going to do phase two. And if they do phase two, like they say they're going to do phase one, the Sacramento Valley is going to be responsible for 35 or 40% of the unimpaired flow February through June. And that means the same issue is going to be faced by the Sacramento Valley. I live in Chico, and they're going to face the same issue. You're going to have massive quantities of additional flow going down the river, and there's not going to be identified a way to mitigate for that flow going down the river on how it impacts your groundwater basin. Because let's face it, if you're not getting your surface water year in and year out, you're going to pump groundwater to make up for that when you have your trees planted, when you have your rice planted, and when you're a small family farmer.
All right, well, thank you. So obviously we just heard a statement from Mr. Grober. I don't want it to be an entire back and forth. But there is a proceeding ongoing right now to come to a determination on Mr. Grover's statement. Am I correct? And
With regard to the San Joaquin River?
Yeah.
That's going to be the first step.
Yeah.
But if I may add a critical point, because I've heard balancing, and balancing is really broadly in terms of the SAC and the San Joaquin. The proposal that was considered 2 years ago was 35%, and it was going to consider a range even within that, a block of water. Currently, on the Sacramento side, about 50% of the unimpaired flow is coming down, and it's a much larger overall quantity because the Sacramento River has more water. But there's the balancing issue as well in terms of, well, what's the fair share in terms of system-wide.
Oh.
But yes, we're doing the as Mr. Laughlin said, we're doing the San Joaquin River portion first.
okay, thank you for that clarification, Mr. Dolly.
So that was my original question then. If you're doing the San Joaquin now, how's it going to impact the Sacramento, which is the region I represent, the north, the Sacramento River?
During that critical period, any quantity of water that does not come down the San Joaquin River would have to come from the Sacramento side to meet Delta standards.
Okay. Are there any other comments that we have from the members? Mr. Bigelow?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of them. One, Mr. Gray, thank you very much for this. I know it's a challenging bill, and it's very delicate, as we can all see here. A lot of straws in here, and everyone's trying to do the best they can. Recognizing that the San Joaquin is made up of a number of tributaries that feed into it, maybe because I'm having to deal with the San Joaquin and a number of these tributaries, in particular the Tuolumne River. Maybe you could address how this proposal would affect the Tuolumne River, and then I'll come back possibly for a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. I'll let Mr. Laughlin.
The Tuolumne River is the largest river next to the main stem of the San Joaquin River, makes up of roughly 32% of the San Joaquin River flows. This bill would have the state board action is going to have a devastating impact on the Tuolumne River. Approximately somewhere around 60 to 70% of the water that's going to be required to be released to meet the 35% unimpaired flow will come from the Tuolumne River. And this just isn't a valley bill. I mean, I know it's a lot of talk here about ag, but this will have a significant impact on the city and county of San Francisco. We presented testimony to the State Water Resources Control Board last year. This could have upwards to $2 billion in certain years, impacts to the city and county of San Francisco and the Bay Area, a reduction in drinking water to the city and county of San Francisco. So the impacts within the city and county of San Francisco are significant. The impacts within the groundwater basin, Stanislaus County, would be significant as well. You're looking at a reduction, Mr. Bigelow, based on the State Water Resources Control Board substitute environmental document, that you would lose on average somewhere around 20 to 40,000 acres of planted irrigated acreage within Stanislaus County, within Modesto and Turlock irrigation districts on average, and up to 218,000 acres in dry years.
Thank you very much. Very concerning. It's not just for the impact of the local communities that are served by the Tuolumne River locally in the mountains that I serve, but it extends clear out to the Bay Area, where a significant impact will be created by a much larger population that exists. I know on the San Joaquin River, decades was spent in litigating a settlement on the flows of the river that would be going south to the Delta. Now it sounds like we're going to cast that off to the side after that was resolved in federal court and try to take even more flows. And we're not talking about pulse flows, we're talking about continuous flows. So it's very concerning what we're hearing here today. I think Mr. Gray's bill proposes for us a common sense solution. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Gerber, did you have a comment on that?
Just to really punch the point again, because we've heard the comments and the concerns on the effect of water supply, and these are real effects that would occur with any proposal. But the refinement that we're doing these last 2 years is to identify, disclose what would be the economic effect to a place like the city of San Francisco and the water supply effect, ag, and hydropower effects. So we disclose all of that, and then the board then can use that information to do the balancing to figure out, well, what makes sense. So anything that prevents the board from being able to make decisions to kind of do that balancing would be problematic in terms of next steps in doing anything in terms of establishing flows for the board to do the balancing of protections for fish and wildlife and agriculture and municipal.
Mr. Williams.
Sorry, my throat is going to sound a little strange, but I just want to tell you that while I think that this bill and the author identify a real issue, which is that in many of these decisions, there is probably a better way to create mutual benefit for both fish and farmers than simply do large levels of flow. However, I think that the way that this is done is not the right way to go about getting a positive resolution, interfering with the state board process, and essentially forcing a kind of resolution that might not get to that win-win. I obviously, as chair of natural resources and as a member of this committee, would offer the author and the stakeholders to be willing to wade in. I was part of a JPA. We faced a similar thing in a microcosm. Obviously, we're not as big a river as you guys, but the positive resolution was that in lieu of additional flows, we did a whole lot more capital projects and refugia that would benefit fish species, because it was easier, even though spending money is tough, it was easier to spend money than to lose all the water. However, that kind of positive win-win resolution would actually be interfered with because of the imperative to only look at mitigation of this one factor. And so I just think this is the wrong way to get to a positive resolution. And so I hope that this won't be the last that we hear of the issue, but I just hope that this bill is not the way to do it.
Mr. Grover, do you have a comment on that?
I'd like to just respond because there's a critical element of the proposal that I haven't mentioned, is that it's not just a proposal that went out in 2012 for just one number, the 35%. It was crafted as a range of 25 to 45%, expressly to address the concern that, well, how do you incentivize even better solutions that might involve habitat and things like that? And the 25% actually encompassed basically the flows, the current percent of unimpaired flow on the Merced and the Tuolumne River now. So it's providing that time frame, that adaptive management component, so that you can have another form of success.
Thank you. Were there any other comments or questions? Mr. Dodd.
Yeah. Why didn't your proposal contain any mitigation measures for what you called significant and unavoidable impacts? Unless I missed something.
Well, this is really the challenge. When you have a limited supply of water, it does ultimately come down to trade-offs, and that's the balancing, as how much water is directed towards the fish and wildlife beneficial use in this case, as opposed to the agricultural beneficial use in this case, mostly. And you can't make more water, so it is in that you can't. So the mitigation, the form that it would take, would that be money, compensation, which is something the board can't provide? Certainly, and this is actually speaking to the thinking smartly about it and the settlement and negotiation, there are opportunities for doing, say, expanded conjunctive management in times when you do have more water, that you could do even more in terms of the incidental conjunctive use that's occurring with flood irrigation. So there could be more of that. But for the board to step into that and start prescribing those things would be problematic.
All right, without any further questions or comments, Mr. Gray, would you like to close?
I would. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members, for a thoughtful discussion. I want to just touch on a couple of things. Both Mr. Garza, Assemblymember Williams raised balance on this subject, and I think, in fact, that's what we're driving towards, is, in fact, achieving some kind of balance. You can't, the board staff themselves raised the discussion, well, how would we mitigate? Money, projects? Yes, those are options. Mr. Williams, you raised some other options that would, in fact, be mitigation of the issue. But if the end of the day we leave statute in place, members, that allow the water board to say the decimation of your community, a take of this enormity, is significant but unavoidable, that's unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable for my community. And that's why we need this bill to move forward today, so we can continue these discussions that I think, in fact, are productive, and we would like to continue to work with the committee as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Unfortunately, I'm unable to support the bill today. I do have respect for the proceedings that are ongoing. I also have grave concern about legislation that essentially will benefit one community at the expense of other communities at this time. And I think that might be a place that would really open up the legislature to ridicule in how we're dealing with water policy during this drought. So with that, we'll call the roll.
AB 1242, due pass to Natural Resources Committee. Levine.
No.
Levine, no. Bigelow.
Yes.
Bigelow, aye. Dolly.
Not voting.
Dolly, not voting. Dodd. Gaines. Garcia.
No.
Garcia, no. Gomez. Gray.
Aye.
Gray, aye. Harper.
Aye.
Harper, aye. Lopez. No. Lopez, no. Mathis. Medina.
Aye.
Medina, aye. Rendon. Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas, aye. Williams.
No.
Williams, no. Dodd, aye.
You have 6 votes. You're too short. We'll leave the roll open for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are now entering the regular order of business today. And is Mr. Fraser here? Okay, so if Mr. Fraser is not here, we'll start with Mr. Dodd.
Mr. Chairman and members.
Will the bill do pass?
AB 367 concerns problems besetting Clear Lake in my district and state assistance to help eradicate those problems. Let me begin by acknowledging the suggested amendment on page 6 of the analysis and accepting that as the author's amendments. I will work on this issue of funding source as this bill moves to the Appropriations Committee. Mr. Chairman and members, Clear Lake in Lake County is a state treasure. It is the largest inland body of water in California, totaling 68 miles of surface area. The lake is home to many types of fish, waterfowl, and other animal species. Clear Lake is used for recreation and drinking water, among other purposes, and the lake is vital to Lake County's economy. Unfortunately, Clear Lake is beset with a number of serious problems that threaten fish and wildlife, that reduce the quality of lake water, and that hamper lake recreational opportunities. These problems include excess phosphorus flowing into the lake, periodic explosions of algae blooms, which create unsightly slicks and odors, and sometimes produce harmful toxins. The lake is also contaminated with mercury, which leaches into the lake from a nearby closed Superfund mining site. Clear Lake has already lost 79% of the wetlands that have historically surrounded the lake, and therefore the lake has lost an important means of trapping nutrients that feed the algae blooms. Clear Lake has been listed by the State Water Resources Control Board as impaired, and the board has stated that the lake needs a great deal of work to restore it to a healthy and balanced body of water. Over the years, Lake County has launched a number of efforts to address the problems, including placing local sales tax increases on the ballot. But a rural county, there is a lack of resources. There is a lack of resources to effectively eradicate the lake's problems. In 1973, the legislature transferred title of the lake's submerged lands to the county and expressly required that the county use of the lake for purposes of general interest to the state, such as protection of wildlife habitat and conservation of wildlife and fish resources. In light of the threats to the fish and wildlife, healthy drinking water, economic opportunity, and given the state's mandate that the county maintain the lake, the state has an abiding interest in helping Lake County address Clear Lake's abundant problems. AB 367 simply appropriates $2.4 million one time to assist Lake County in addressing the problems besetting Clear Lake. I'm unaware of any opposition to this bill, and I ask for an aye vote. With me today from Lake County is Supervisor Jim Steele, as well as Scott DeLeon, who is the Lake County Director of Public Works.
I'm Joan Moss.
Any witnesses in support that'd like to testify?
I would.
Yes. Please, you start.
Okay, I've been researching and attending meetings for a very long time.
Your name first.
Joan Moss.
Thank you, John.
I am part of Citizens for Responsible Development.
Thank you.
Lake County Mobile Homeowners and Seventh Generation Collective Media. In 1973, as Mr. Dodds writes, the state of California conveyed in trust the submerged lands in Clear Lake to Lake County in furtherance of navigation and commerce and the fisheries. I want to submit to you that the Lake County is to manage the lake, and I don't think Lake County has enough money to solve the problems all by itself. I wrote an article about the mercury in the lake many years ago, and I want to point out, as Mr. Dodd did, that mercury, the Regional Water Quality Control Board in 2010 declared the Clear Lake to be an impaired body of water for mercury. Clear Lake is actually also an impaired body of water for nutrients. There is a final report called Harmful Cyanobacteria Blooms and Their Toxins in Clear Lake and the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And this was by Cecile Meone, Lake County water engineer, Tom Smythe, a number of people.
Mr. Chairman, we appreciate Ms. Moss's comments. My expert witnesses are sitting to the right and the left of me, and I respectfully ask the chair to let that start with Supervisor Steele.
I'd sure like to finish my statement.
My faux pas here, I didn't recognize that those were the only two. I thought she was a part of your
I did call and warn people that I was coming.
I'm sorry, but
with all due respect, I'll recognize the author's request, and I'll start with his two witnesses, reminding you that you each have just a couple of minutes
that's
for
the point.
testimony.
Thank you for your testimony.
And excuse me, ma'am, for this. That was the vice chair's fault. Sir, we'll start with you.
Good morning. I'm Scott DeLeon. I'm the Public Works and Water Resources Director for Lake County, and I would actually, if it's okay, I would defer to our elected official. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Jim Steele. I'm a new supervisor in Lake County. However, I have a environmental scientist career with the state for over 30 years and another 10 years as a consultant on endangered species and wildlife issues. I've worked on fish and wildlife issues such as the old-growth forests of spotted owls, forest practice rules, coastal salmon recovery, offshore oil well siting, freshwater ecology issues around the entire state. I was at the branch chief level when I retired. California is among the 50 states. The contiguous 50 states is historically the most diverse in species of all of those states, but also has the most listed species of all of those states. The frontiers of diversity have been pushed back, leaving pockets of California's rich heritage, and Lake County is unique amongst the 58 counties. It's the highest in species richness because of its unique setting in the coastal mountains, and it has essentially been bypassed by development and has tremendous attributes, with Clear Lake being the center of that county. It's a product of plate tectonics, creating a natural shallow lake system with a constant dropping floor that keeps up with siltation for over 500 and up to as much as 1 million years. To compare, the Great Lakes have a lifespan of about 10,000 years. When you think of the special treasures of California, Yosemite, Tahoe, Shasta, old-growth trees, the Death Valley, the largest, oldest freshwater natural ecosystem in North America is right up there with them, and we have it in our backyard. But it's also very expensive. It isn't treated right. We haven't been able to do that in the past. Unfortunately, the science for such a complex ecosystem is just catching up to the needs of managing such ecosystem issues. Clear Lake has been studied, fortunately, for decades, and Clear Lake also has a 450 square mile watershed, all of which affects the lake. This watershed is rich in phosphorus sediments from the volcanics, and Tahoe, for example, for comparison, has 1/10 the watershed with nutrient-poor soils, and yet they get attention for added nutrients. It's still very clear we're very nutrient-rich. The base issues for Clear Lake was described over 20 years ago. Oh, okay. Were described over 20 years ago, and we have all of the issues resolved from the standpoint of what to do, and so we know how to spend the money.
Thank you, sir. Any other support?
Yes, please. I'm Scott DeLeon. I'm the Public Works Director, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. And I'd also like to thank Assemblyman Dodd for forwarding this important legislation. As the Public Works Director, I oversee the Water Resources Department and specifically the Watershed Protection District for Lake County. The Watershed Protection District is charged with the responsibility to protect, develop, and improve the quality of all waters in the district, to include surface and subsurface waters for all beneficial uses, to include domestic, irrigation, industrial, and recreational uses. Our district boundary is the county line, and our annual revenues from property taxes amount to about $770,000 a year. The district does not have the resources to address the issues that you've heard. We've attempted 3 sales tax measures with the county, requiring 2/3 vote. They've come close, garnering between 65 and 66%, but we just can't get past the 2/3 threshold. We have an opportunity to with some discretionary funds to leverage for additional grants, and I am here to answer any questions, any technical questions that you might have about the district and our functions.
Thank you very much. Is there any other? I think you did already speak. Are there other folks that need to speak? Yes, sir, in the back.
Kyle Jones, California, in support.
Great. Thank you.
Jennifer Capitolo on behalf of California Water Service Company, and we serve the community of Lucerne in Lake County, and primary drinking source of water for that community is Clear Lake.
Okay, great. More testimony and support?
I've spent a significant amount of time in the Clear Lake area, and to me, this is a slam dunk.
Great, thank you. Is there a testimony in opposition to this bill? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to any questions or comments from members. Seeing none. So I know that you already did speak. We want to make sure that everyone's provided the testimony that they need to. I don't see any questions or comments.
Mr. Chair, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion? There was. Fantastic. No one seconded it. Can I get... all right. Thank you. Let's call the roll.
AB 367 to pass as amended to Appropriations Committee. Levine?
Aye.
Levine, aye. Bigelow? Bigelow, aye. Dolly? Dodd?
Aye.
Dodd, aye. Gaines? Garcia?
Aye.
Garcia, aye. Gomez? Gray? Aye. Gray, aye. Harper?
No.
Harper, no. Lopez?
Aye.
Lopez, aye. Mathis?
No.
Mathis, no. Medina?
Aye.
Medina, aye. Rendon? Ridley Thomas?
Aye.
Ridley Thomas, aye. Williams?
Aye.
Williams, aye.
Congratulations, and thank you very much, Mr. Dodd. Mr. Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Of course.
Members.
Please, Mr. Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. I would like to open by accepting the committee's amendments. I appreciate your willingness to work with us on this important bill, Mr. Chair. AB 665 is
do pass as amended.
in the effort of time, I'll relegate my time to some of the witnesses to respect your time.
Thank you so much. Any testimony in support?
Yes. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Mark Henley with California Waterfowl Association. We are the sponsors of the bill. We believe the local regulations over fishing game matters creates significant enforcement issues. It increases confusion amongst sportsmen due to the often conflicting regulations and increases fishing game and fishing game commission staff time. The bill would address this by clarifying in the code that the commission and the department are the only entities that can regulate the taking of fishing game. We urge your support and we'd be happy to answer any questions if they come up.
Great. Anyone else in support?
Bill Gaines, representing the Wild Sheep Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, National Wild Turkey Foundation, and several other wildlife conservation interests. This bill is a common sense bill that would not preclude private landowners from closing their lands to hunting and fishing, but would allow others to access the public lands.
Great. Thank you so much. Any other in support? Just state your name and who you represent in your position, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. George Osborne. I'm representing the California Fish and Game Wardens Association, and I'm also here representing the California Sport Fishing League. From an enforcement standpoint, we think this is a great leap forward, again, to have uniform enforcement up and down the state for the wardens, and also for the sportsmen of the state. It's good to have simplified regulations all in one place and all the same for up and down the coast. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, fellow members. Rick Bullock with Apex. We represent ag and sportsmen's interests, and we are in support. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any opposition to this bill?
Chairman Levine, members of the committee, Assemblymember Frazier. I'm Jennifer Fearing here today on behalf of the Humane Society of the United States and the Marin Humane Society. And while we're grateful for the amendments being taken today, we still have strong concerns with AB 665. First and foremost, our biggest concern is that the bill isn't needed. And Governor Schwarzenegger agreed when he vetoed the prior version of this bill in 2010 with a message stating, quote, "This bill is unnecessary. The department already has the authority to regulate the taking of fishing game throughout the state." And the state has successfully defended its sovereignty in high-profile cases like last year's temporary ban on pier fishing issued by the city of Manhattan Beach. The California Fish and Game Commission wrote to the mayor asserting, quote, since 1902, the regulation of fishing activity has been exclusively reserved to the state. The legislature and the courts have long recognized our commission's sole authority to regulate fishing activity. End quote. Manhattan Beach did not move forward with an ordinance. If AB 665 were just unnecessary, we wouldn't be opposing. We, in fact, support the state's sovereignty with regard to hunting and fishing activities. And some of you may remember that we urged this committee last year to oppose Assemblymember Donnelly's AB 2205, in part on the grounds that it would have undermined state wildlife management activities. But our concern is that AB 665 expands the state's authority, and the inclusion of Section C1 might lead to preemption and invalidation of existing local ordinances which are aimed at protecting public health and safety, especially limits many jurisdictions have put on the use of lethal and maiming animal traps. Such ordinances are often aimed at reducing the risk that such traps pose to pets, kids, and non-target wildlife in urban and suburban areas. Examples include, but are not limited to, the city of San Rafael's ban on the use of traps and poisons in city open space areas, and a ban on snares and other body gripping traps enacted by the city of Los Angeles. As written, AB 665 is unclear as to whether these existing ordinances would remain lawful or whether cities and counties would continue to have rights to pursue such protections in the future. We're concerned about significant litigation that might result, and efforts to protect communities from activities which would have only an incidental impact on hunting and fishing will be harder to enact. We're also worried about the explicit addition of the words, quote, public health and safety to the Commission's considerations in Section 203.1. The Commission's mission is to ensure the long-term sustainability of California's fish and wildlife resources. We agree with the state maintaining this broad authority, but counties and local municipalities should retain their power to restrict activities that they deem posing an unacceptable hazard to its residents. I attended the California Fish and Game Commission meeting in Santa Rosa last Thursday, where this bill was discussed. One commissioner voiced concerns similar to ours, and no motion was made to convey the commission's support for the bill. I can assure you that if the commission felt that the state's sovereignty over hunting and fishing was in any way threatened, they would be lining up to ask for this bill. Again, on behalf of the Marin Humane Society and the Humane Society of the United States, we respectfully urge your no vote.
Thank you. Others providing testimony?